We are joined by our resident panel of experts, Merrill from the Kid Early Childhood Alliance and Ava Bermuda Zimmerman from Child Care for CT. I want to start by thanking Sandra for providing interpretation for us, and welcome and Happy New Year to everyone here. Also, today is Three Kings Day, so very special celebration day, and for everyone who is marking that day, enjoy it. I have family in New Orleans, and today is the beginning of the Mardi Gras season. So even though I'm not Catholic, it starts a really important season for everybody who has ties to that community as well. I know it's a really big deal for many, many members of our community. And so I hope the day is special for you. Reminders that we will use the chat for any technical difficulties or communication between the community, and the Q&A for any questions for our panelists. We had scheduled today CBIA to do an insurance presentation, but unfortunately the presenter is sick this morning. And so we're going to instead pivot and do a kind of what's new in the legislative session, which begins this week. So just want to let you know about that pivot if you saw it in the calendar. If you didn't and you don't know how to get to the calendar, you can go to earlycareconnection.org and you can see the calendar there. You can click to get through to old recordings, you can click to join if you ever lose your link. And you can subscribe to our YouTube there so that when we post new videos, you'll automatically get an email letting you know that they're there. Just a reminder before we get started that we will have a call next week, but that the following week, we will not have a call in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And then we'll be back again the week after that. Okay, so welcome back. Happy New Year. Hope everyone's holidays were wonderful and restful. And I am going to turn it right over to Merrill and Ava to present on what's new in the legislative session. All right, you guys are up.
All right. So we have a bunch of movement in committee chairs. The governor will do his State of the State speech on Wednesday. And then in early February, he'll present the budget, and the Appropriations Committee will start all of their budget conversations or budget hearings. I'm going to post the list of committee chairs as of mid-December or so. It does not include ranking members from the House yet. And there will clearly be some changes in the Senate because it appears that Senator Kelly will take a judgeship rather than get sworn in as a senator. So there'll be a special election there. That'll impact. He was listed as committee chair or ranking member for the Children's Committee and the Human Services Committee. So there'll be somebody else in that role. We still don't know yet who the House folks were, unless you've got an updated list, Ava.
I don't have an updated list, but I do want to share with everyone that ranking member means the party that's not in control gets positions that will also be in committees, but they're not, because they're not the majority, they don't get to be the chairs. And the person that is in a position of leadership in that committee is called a ranking member. So right now, the House and the Senate are both controlled by the Democratic Party. The Democratic leaders of the House and the Senate get to decide who is in charge of each committee. And then each committee then appoints different people. Then they appoint different people who are going to sit on those committees. And the Republicans, because they're not in control, they're not the party control in the House and the Senate, are called ranking members.
Yeah. So the leadership of the House and the Senate remains unchanged. Speaker Ritter and Senator Looney is the Senate president. The most notable changes from our perspective are changes in the House leadership of the Education Committee. Many of you heard that Representative Curry did not run for re-election and will be serving as on the staff of the ranking of the majority leader, Representative Rojas. So instead, it'll be Representative Leeper, who will be the House chair of the Education Committee. And then in the Children's Committee, Corey Paris will be the House chair there.
And the exciting thing about both of those elected officials, they do have a background in education. More specifically, Corey Paris from Stanford, Representative Paris, used to work for one of the largest childcare centers in the state, CLC, in Stanford, for years, and has, anecdotal experience of how difficult it is for all of you, operating the workforce, trying to find funding, trying to stay alive, because he lived it, right? He was fundraising for childcare for many years. And then that's the Children's Committee. And then on the Education Committee, Jen Leeper was an administrator at a school. She also served on the Board of Ed. And she also, for years, since she got elected, was vice chair of the Education Committee. So it's not like we're getting people who are completely disconnected from this conversation. Merrill, myself, and other lobbyists who work in this field have talked to them, have met with both Corey and Jen, and they're enthusiastic. They understand the importance of early care and education. They understand the importance of really supporting families. Fantastic decisions on leadership's end to take two people who want to fight the fight with us. So it's very exciting.
So just thinking about the upcoming session, there will be public hearings on the governor's budget starting in early February, shortly, usually in the weeks right after the budget comes out. So probably the second and third week of February. Those hearings will be important because they're about money. The other, there will be clearly issues. The legislature will be grappling with the fiscal constraints. The Connecticut Mirror has been running a number of stories that are useful to help understand all of that. But it's sort of to boil it down to its essence, Connecticut has lots of revenue coming in because the stock market's been doing really well and the economy generally is doing pretty well. But we tied our hands as far as spending so that lots of good programs are being starved of resources, and the fiscal constraints don't let us spend money that we have. And so there will be a lot of efforts to try and figure out a way to modify those or make it possible to spend some of the money that we have on things that are really important.
For those of you who typically don't attend the community meetings for Childcare for CT, the last community meeting that we did had to do with the fiscal constraints, and it was a deep dive by attorney Logan Place, who works and negotiates labor law and labor contracts between the state of Connecticut and different labor organizations. He had a PowerPoint presentation and the legal team in his office have done some really in-depth research of how possibly to change the laws and maybe circumvent the laws of the fiscal constraints to get some of that money into the coffers of everyday Connecticut residents. And I thought it was very informative. He took a topic that's very complicated and tried, to dissect it in ways that all of us who are not lawyers could understand it. and really understand how we got to the place of having those fiscal constraints to begin with. So I'm gonna pop into our chat
Hold on.
right now.
I'm gonna put the YouTube link.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Izzy's gonna add the YouTube link.
That I believe has all of those, I believe it has all of those links in the chat,
actual
but if it
presentation.
doesn't, we'll make sure that that is updated.
Okay.
But you can see the presentation.
It gives a bigger, like, it gives us a better understanding of why the big picture is the big picture right now, why we have so much money and the state can't spend it. You know, that 4 billion price tag or amount of money in the bank that you've heard probably from newspapers or local news outlets saying, well, Connecticut's in the billions of a surplus, but why can't we use it, right? We're coming into the session knowing that we have a lot of money, but no access to that money. And Logan does a very good job explaining why.
Yes, and I also put a Connecticut Mirror article about the guardrails and how they're being discussed, if that's useful for folks.
Merrill, do you think it's worth talking about some of the conversations we've been hearing in the grapevine about what the governor might be thinking, or just wait till Wednesday?
Well, I've been kind of out of the picture for the last couple of weeks, so I'm not sure I'm up to date on.
I will, you know, jump in then. So from different sources, the lobbying community and the advocacy community is very close, very tight-knit, and there aren't that many early care and childcare advocates who are professionally lobbying out there here in Connecticut. But it is very clear from those conversations of other lobbyists that everyone has heard to some degree that the governor has a desire to do something. And this is, I guess, to not even say it's hearsay and say it's a little bit more direct. When our lobbying team with Child Care for CT met with the governor's chief of staff, even in that conversation, it was clear that he said the governor is very intent on really helping early care and education. So that's less hearsay, less rumor mill, a little bit more direct information, right? The question is, what will that be? We have no idea. They did not want to, in that meeting that I had, they didn't want to give details. And then in conversations with other people who have met with the governor and other lobbyists who have met with other team members of the governor's office, no one seems to know what that plan is. We are really hoping that in his speech, his State of the State, like Merrill mentioned, he will say what that will be. We think that there might be some plans to release some of these fiscal constraints that Merrill mentioned, and you know, we can't release all of them. There are laws in place that safeguard a good portion of that money, and in order to release all of the money, we'd have to wait till 2026. When the 5-year window expires, and then the legislative body has the ability to take a dive and redo it all. To expedite that, they need a 3/5 majority to try to change all those rules now, but the likelihood of that happening is very slim. So we're just going to wait for the 5-year timeline. Now, the governor does have the authority with executive power to say we're going to undo the volatility cap, some of these safeguards, some of these constraints, and then release some of that money. So we are not sure if the governor is going to, you know, dive in and negotiate with the legislative body to undo some of it, or if he's going to say, I'm the governor, here's my executive decision, this is what I want moving forward. What we do know, again, is that they do have appetite, desire, ambition to help early care and education. And it's not, you know, we're not talking about the $5 million, $10 million mark. We're probably talking about, you know, double, triple zeros, probably 100 million, 200 million. but we will see and hopefully know by Wednesday. So if any of you have time on Wednesday throughout the day, we will make sure on, to share probably on the early care listserv, the EC listserv, the link to CTN. So you could see the live video of the governor announcing what his plan for Connecticut is. And then, if you don't have an opportunity to watch the video in live time, then take some time, the same night or maybe the next day, and read about it or hear about it and see what he said. You better believe that early care advocacy organizations like Merrill's, like Child Care for CT and others will probably be giving some updates to their members about any major policy that is being promoted by the governor. So just be on the lookout, and we'll try to communicate as much information in live time as we could. So kind of rumors, kind of not rumors, but an exciting year because leadership is really looking at early care as a place to spend real money. Hopefully the real money is hundreds of millions rather than like another Band-Aid.
Yeah. So now the other thing that we need to be paying attention to is what's happening in Washington. Today they will count the electoral votes, assuming the snowstorm hasn't shut the city down, which it might have, but they have passed a continuing resolution because they haven't passed a budget yet for this current year. So what Congress does when they can't come to a decision on a budget is a continuing resolution, which basically says, we'll do what we did last year, we'll just keep doing it. And they have done that through March, sometime in March. And then what is likely to happen is that the new Republican majority will use budget reconciliation, which is a technical process that lets them move things through both chambers of Congress with a simple majority vote. The Senate usually requires 60 votes to shut off a filibuster. So any one senator can say, I'm going to just keep talking. And that will shut down the Senate. On budget, with a budget reconciliation vote, they can pass it with a simple majority. And so that's how the Inflation Adjustment Act passed under the Democrats in the last session. It's how a bunch of the whole big package of pandemic relief money passed, was on through budget reconciliation. What we are hearing as rumors is that Congress has to address the tax cuts that are all scheduled to end this year. So there were a whole slew of tax cuts passed under the first Trump administration that are primarily for rich people and corporations. And those tax credits end this year. So there will be a lot of pressure to renew all of those. And so budget reconciliation may be used for that. It may also be used to make changes to things like immigration policy and the budgets that are needed for the pretty draconian stuff that the new administration is talking about doing with mass deportations. Now, the issue with budget reconciliation is it's covered by another law that says that tax cuts have to be paid for by something else, usually spending cuts. And so the big place where spending cuts are being talked about is in the Medicaid program. That's what funds Husky. And in Connecticut, we call it Husky, but across the rest of the country, it's Medicaid. And that could have big implications because we're halfway through a federal budget by the time they do this. If they make big cuts, essentially the federal government has already spent half a year's worth of money, and any cuts are going to come in the second half of the year. So that could be a huge cut to the Medicaid grants or the Medicaid reimbursements to states, which could blow a big hole in the state budget. That could be the fiscal emergency that gets us to doing something around the fiscal constraints. I don't know yet. But there'll be a lot of people watching those issues. And as soon as we hear more, we could schedule one of these to talk about the implications for all of that. Because that'll have huge implications for lots of people who rely on Husky for healthcare.
And Merrill, that we anticipate to have a little bit more information around March, right?
Yeah.
The other conversation we've heard from the federal pipeline, and I know I highlighted some of this in our last, before we went on winter recess, is Head Start funding and some changes that were made during federal legislative session. And then we anticipate now might be revealing some changes in Health and Human Services. And if you want more details on that, the same link that Izzy put on our chat earlier with Logan Place has a presentation about those details from the National Women's Law Center and what to expect. So if you want to better understand how federal legislation might be impacting Connecticut legislation or Connecticut funding through the legislative process, then check out the recording. There's a much deeper dive on how the two connect.
And the other thing with Head Start was that there were a set of regulatory changes made that eventually got printed in the Federal Register in August. However, there is a law that says that regulations that are passed in the waning hours of an administration can be overturned by Congress if those took place in during the last 90 business days of Congress in the year. So the problem is that Congress was in recess for a big chunk of the fall. And so 90 business days takes us back to the beginning of August, and those regulations got printed a week or two into August. So the other issue here is that if Congress repeals regulations under that law, the agency is then forever forbidden to make regulations on that subject. So that could have some big issues there. I am sure that the National Head Start Association has been keeping the Head Start program grantees here in Connecticut aware of all of that. And that's obviously will have biggest impact on Head Start programs.
And then again, similar to what Merrill was mentioning with Medicaid, we don't know until we kind of know. So once we have the official report, we'll definitely announce it on one of our calls.
Yeah. So the other two issues there's Child Care Development Block Grant funding, which was actually pretty popular in the first Trump administration. Republicans increased funding for it. We'll see whether that holds true in this administration or not. And the other question is on tax policy. There is a bipartisan proposal to increase the amount that parents can get as a tax credit for the costs they pay out for childcare. And so we've been trying to get that into the mix of conversations about what's going to be in the final tax package, whether it's in a budget reconciliation bill or it's just in a budget. But the idea of having parents able to take a credit would provide some relief for middle-class parents. It's less useful for families who don't have the money to spend on childcare in the first place. But for families who are paying tuition but struggling to do so, would provide them with some relief.
I am going to also just put one more Hartford Current link in which the headline is of course very seductive, but 2025 CT legislative session starts Wednesday with focus on financial relief for residents. I thought it was really interesting to read all of the ways that they're sort of thinking about in childcare, what's shouted out in there. So if you can read the Hartford Courant, that's a good one as well.
Just to do a little bit of repeating, because we had about 50 new people that jumped in the last 10 minutes and weren't here in the very beginning. We put into the chat a link that gives you a list of all of the legislators who have been appointed to leadership positions, different committees. And there's also an announcement that Senator Kelly, he represents the Stratford area, will not be staying in his seat and not be swearing in. He just got elected with everyone else, and has been elected since 2011, but he is going to be appointed as a judge. So if any of you are in the Stratford area, then you should probably be on the lookout for a special election, I'm assuming, right? They have like 2 months, Merrill, usually for a special election when someone resigns a seat.
Something like that, yeah.
So there should be, yeah, if you're in Stratford, I think it has a sliver of Hamden.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? So you should be very soon hearing.
Shelton and Monroe is what.
Oh, wow, okay. Because the cities are not, the towns are not that big, so they just have them, okay. So Shelton, Monroe, sliver of Hamden, and Stratford, because the towns aren't that big and it's about population. So if you live there, please be on the lookout, get engaged, get involved, and make sure that the candidate that you want understands about early care and education, understands what, why it's such high stakes. We want as many elected officials in positions of power that can help early care and education. So the time is now. Special elections usually are decided by a couple hundred people, which is very sad because people don't know what's happening. And this is a great opportunity for, the early care community, childcare community to step up and decide who's going to fight for us and have another senator there who understands what our needs are.
Yep, and there's in the chat, Kelly is also Shelton and Monroe. Thank you, David.
Yeah. So I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you all about a workshop that the Alliance is doing. When we get into public hearings and press conferences and all of those sorts of things, it is really important for us to be able to tell our story. So we have scheduled a day-long storytelling workshop on Saturday, February 1st. We're looking to find a location, a central location, maybe New Britain, someplace like that. And we are bringing in somebody who's been doing storytelling workshops in Kentucky for a while now. She's she's got a degree. She's a really great workshop leader, and we are hoping that some of you will click that link and sign up to attend that and to think about, are there staff or parents who have compelling stories about the problems of finding care, affording care, working in this field, those staff who are working 2 jobs. We are trying to make sure that we can lift up those stories to demonstrate the issues that parents and providers are facing, so that legislators who don't have little kids, who aren't living it right now, can better understand the problems. This should be a great workshop. We'll have childcare, we'll have food, but it will be in person because that's how we're going to be able to get the most impact out of this.
We put a bunch of links. Here, Eileen has a question here. Let's see. Is this group doing any updates from community-based providers on the impact of early start CT applications are having on their programs? I'm going to turn to you guys to answer the question.
So I think the easier answer is we have been in discussion before the holidays with the Office of Early Childhood to have a presentation on some of the changes that were made to regs. And I know they were on probably maybe 2 months ago, but in short, they have promised that when they are ready to talk about reg changes and where they are now, that they're going to come on. What we could ask them is to also add some time and have the appropriate presenters to also talk about early start as well. And because we're, OEC is always happy to come on. They just want to make sure that they're presenting the most up-to-date, most appropriate information in time. I think that's a pretty easy request to ask of them. So if we can just hold on tight just a little bit more, so me and Merrill can circle back with them, figure out if in fact this month is a month that they're ready, then we can do a very long 1.5 hours on all things OEC updates.
Great.
So I think the question that Eileen asked is really a place where we need to do some crowdsourcing from all of you about what are the things that you're seeing. What's happened for folks who aren't aware is that OEC put out an RFP for the Early Start program to the existing providers that assured them 90% of the spaces that they had filled. And then there will be a second round of competitive applications for the remaining spaces. So the idea was to try and reassign spaces from places that weren't using them to places that needed them. They also made a change that reduced the amount that was paid under the Early Start program for part day pre-K from $4,500 to $3,000. Most of those part day slots have been located in public schools. And I don't know the full implications of all of that, but I would love to hear from people who either school readiness liaisons or early start contractors from around the state as to like what have been the impacts of this. I know it's created a lot of uncertainty with programs who've had school readiness funding since the late 90s, all of a sudden now seeing fewer spaces. And that creates a lot of anxiety. Now, the second round of funding might enable them to get back all of those spaces that weren't allocated in the first round, but it, I know, is creating lots of worry for folks, especially programs who were not filled last year, but are filled this year because OEC used a 2-year look back when calculating the enrollment figures. And so if there are some folks who wants to, people who want to give us some updates, that'd be great. Izzy's also asking, what's the new Early Childhood Alliance website? It is.
But tell me what it is. I'm putting it in one of the questions.
cteca.org.
So easy.
Yeah.
There's a question here from John. Good morning and Happy New Year. Is there any planning and or a trigger that has been determined or even contemplated, at which point organized groups will be called out to demonstrate strength in numbers to leverage whatever power and influence might exist to support required funding needs? Is the February workshop a soft step in that direction? Let me start by saying that's basically all we are thinking about starting right now. I would recommend first, I'm posting in your question the 2 websites of this group here, which is the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance and Child Care for CT. Both groups will be sending out action alerts, alerts to come to the Capitol to testify, where to submit your story bank, how to be involved, who to contact when you need to, contact a legislator, petitions. You will be inundated in the best way. You will be totally activated and in slightly different ways. So I recommend, if you can, sign up for emails from both groups. You are limited with the Early Childhood Alliance. It is a membership organization. And so most of what they do is available, through their emails. There are a few things that are limited to members only, but absolutely, if your organization isn't a member and you can't convince someone there to join, try anyway. But if you can't, it's worth still being on that email list to keep up to date. And then the CT, Child Care for CT list is also going to be a place where you'll be able to get a lot of action alerts, ways to get involved. And so I encourage everyone here to just go to both websites and subscribe to their email lists and subscribe to social media. I don't know, I'll put in the child, let's see, Merrill, are you also CTECA on social media? I can't remember that off the top of my head. Child Care for CT is at Child Care for CT on X, Instagram, and Facebook, although a little less active on X. So those are all things you can do. And Merrill, maybe, or Vanessa, actually, if you're here, if you could put the social media channels for the Early Childhood Alliance into the chat for everyone, that would be awesome. Okay, the next question from Joanne. The timing of the release of the second Early Start RFP is also a concern. Originally, it was supposed to be in November, and most recently they said January. The OEC website was last updated December 9th. So also pointing that out as a concern. Oh, Vanessa's driving. Merrill, you'll have to do it.
Okay, I'm looking for the Alliance Facebook.
Well, yeah, while Merrill does that, I think because we've already had 3 or 4 questions between the chat and the Q&A, that what we'll do is we'll expedite our request with OEC to maybe see if they can do an early start, jump on our Monday call and do an early start conversation, and then hopefully circle back with them about when they want to do a regulation conversation. So Joanne, Edie, folks who are asking about the RFP, we hear you. We see that you are in need of some answers and some clarity, and we'll see if we can get someone from the OEC team on and report back.
Great. And also I was, so now everyone has the Facebook and Instagram are both the same. It's at CT Early Childhood Alliance on both platforms. So I recommend, whichever platform you use most, Facebook or Instagram, it's going to be pretty similar content on both. So you don't have to subscribe, in 17 different places, but whichever one you do use, you can join both of those feeds. The other thing to mention, in addition to the storytelling workshop, is that the Child Care for CT is also setting up house parties. So that's another way, for back to John, that you can get folks involved. And so if you go to Child Care for CT website, there's like a get involved thing right there up in the right corner. You can click that, and one of the options is host a house party or other ways to get involved. So there's already stuff up that you can sign up for. Tara, who is the organizer for Child Care for CT, will get in touch with you. Just like if you sign up for the storytelling workshop, you'll be in contact with Vanessa. Both of these organizations are really thinking about this a lot right now. And, spend some time on each website and look at the possibilities there for you. The house parties, I believe, are ways for you to invite some friends or colleagues over and kind of talk about what's happening in childcare, why to be involved in this way. So all of those are you can do it just kind of on a personal level with friends. There's other things where you can be at the Capitol testifying. So we sort of have every level of involvement, posting something on social media, to sending letters to legislators, to being up there in person, actually advocating for childcare. There's small, medium, large ways to get involved. And absolutely, this collection of people will meet you wherever you want to be met, so that you can get involved in whatever way you can get involved. All right. Anything else that you guys want to go over today before we wrap up? Merrill or Ava, any final things? Okay.
I guess a reminder to anyone who comes to the community meetings for childcare for CT. Our next one is January 15th, 6:30 p.m. till 7:30 p.m. We're going to be continue the conversation of the connection of the fiscal constraints and how that impacts our own legislative policy agenda. And then it's going to be more of a dialogue. We're going to be doing hopefully breakout groups. And then we expect to present our fully fleshed out plan for the year in the February community meeting.
All right. And then the only last thing that I will say, which is in the chat, might have been a little hard to follow, is if you go to YouTube /@Early Care Connection, you can subscribe to our channel, which will give you a notification every time a video is posted. You don't have to do that. You can just go there and check also. It's just a little bit more of a pain in the neck. When you find the video, and we don't post every single one, you know, if it was, I don't know, we post almost all of them. But if you look in the description of the video, so right below the video, you can watch it, but you can speed it up. So if you're someone who likes to listen fast, you can do that too. In the description though, we post the chat file, which always has all the links. We also post the Spanish audio file. And so if you're, we can't post, Zoom doesn't let us post, get a recording, a full recording with the Spanish audio already embedded in it. And so the best we can do right now is to download the Spanish audio file. You can listen to it that way. And unfortunately, you can listen and you can watch at the same time, and it can sync up if you want, or you can just listen. We do always post all of the presentations in English and Spanish there as well, but that's the best we can do, but it's something. And then all of the links are in the chat file. So you should be able to get everything that you need there, just as a reminder. Okay, and that's it for everybody today. Thank you so much for being here. It was a good crowd for our first day back after hopefully a very restful and wonderful break. As always, thank you to Sandra for providing interpretation, and thank you to this community for being here together for each other and for us all. So let's ride into the new year strong and get ready for this legislative session and make big wins. So happy New Year, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.